Hi, I'm Piper Thunstrom. By day, I'm a senior software engineer who makes a living doing web development. By night, though, I work hard to make programming increasingly accessible to a wider and wider audience. I've helped run local Python user groups and volunteered at a handful of conferences. I do regular speaking engagements where I can be found going on at length about some of my favorite technical topics, like game dev and the amazing power hidden in the corners of the Python standard library. Or I might talk about harder topics, like coming out as trans when you're well known in your community. I'm also a game developer and have focused a significant portion of my career on sharing my love for games with others. So today, I'm going to share a brand new recipe that has revealed a new Python superpower. We're putting a bear in a briefcase and building a game with Pursued by Bear and packaging it up for end users using Beeware's Briefcase. So let's start with Pursued by Bear, an education-focused game library. I'm the author and co-maintainer. For brevity, I'm going to refer to it as PPB for the rest of this talk. PPB started its life as an ill-conceived MVC framework, complete with a strong separation of concerns and dependency injection. It didn't take me long to realize that I was going down the wrong path, and when I had completely failed to make a game using it only 6 months after the project started. About the time I was ready to throw it out, I got a lot of requests to focus on a game-making tool specifically for CS education. That started by doing a lot of research on API design and rebuilding PPB to run the API I wanted, instead of the software purity I had tried to design with previously. Now, we focus on a principles-driven development with a focus on students and learners first, unleashing the creativity without limitations baked into the platform, a genuinely fun API, and a strong focus on inclusion. Second, we need to cover Beeware and Briefcase. Beeware's focus is expanding the boundaries of Python. Write one codebase, deploy it everywhere. By everywhere, they say it in their header: iOS, Android, Windows, macOS, Linux, the web, and tvOS. This includes a bunch of neat tools and libraries that allow you to do things Python just wasn't very good at before. Things like Toga, which allows you to write GUIs that use the OS-styled widgets in Python. Today, though, we care about Briefcase, a packaging tool for Python applications. If you've ever heard of Py2app or PyInstaller, you've got the right idea of what Briefcase does. So let's get started. First, we need to prep our project area. Using your favorite IDE, shell, or file explorer, create a project directory. Here, I'm going to call it Briefcase Bear, but you can name your project whatever you like. Next, we need to set up our virtual environment. You're going to need Python 3.6 or later. Invoke your Python interpreter and use the -m flag and give it the venv module. This is another place where you're going to have to make some decisions. I really like using .venv as my virtual environments, but you can call it something else if you'd like. Now that your virtual environment is set up, we need to activate it. This is slightly different on each platform, but source or run the activate script. Finally, we need to install Briefcase. Using the virtual environment's pip, we'll call the install command and tell it Briefcase. Now with our preparation in order, it's time to get the scaffolding for our game ready. Thankfully, Briefcase can do that for us. Let's start by running Briefcase new in our shell. As you can see, we get some output that will walk us through this. First, we need a formal name. This is a name for humans, so write it as you would want people to read it. I'll call mine Briefcase Bear. For the second entry, we need the name the computers care about. It does warn you that the name here must be usable as a Python package identifier. You'll need to see PEP 508 for more detail. We're going to use the default that Briefcase gives us. Now we need a bundle identifier, which is a short way of saying that we need an identifier for you. It's usually a domain name you control, but in reverse order from how you're used to seeing it. So my website lives at piper.thunstrom.dev, so I'll actually use dev.thunstrom.piper. Next, we need to name the project. I'm going to let it match the name of the application, but you can actually have multiple apps in this single project if you'd prefer. Now, Briefcase needs some metadata about the project, starting with a description. For now, let's just say this project is a tiny video game. Now the author, I'm Piper Thunstrom, but you should put your name, or the team behind your game. Now an email, which I use with all of my games. This is a URL, you can change it later, so I'm going to leave this as is until I set up a project page for it later. Finally, we need to pick a license. Pick your favorite, or add your own with option 9, Other. In this case, I'm going to choose proprietary or no license until I decide how I'd prefer to license this code. We now get to pick a GUI framework. For today, pick PursuedPyBear, but there's 2 other built-in ones, or you can default to none to add your own. A little bit of output later, and we have a Briefcase Bear directory in our project directory. One of the neat things about Briefcase is that it uses the new world of packaging configuration, pyproject.toml. Unfortunately for us, it fills this out based on a fixed version of PPB, so we're going to need to open this file and modify the metadata. Pay attention, because if you need to make changes later, like the web page for your project, this is where you're going to need to do it. Let's open pyproject.toml. At the top is Briefcase metadata. This is things like the name of the project, your information, the licensing info. Below that is the actual information we care about. This is information about the application we're building, including the requirements. See where it says PPB 0.8? Let's bump that version up to the latest, PPB 0.10. That gets us ready for starting on our new game. First, let's talk about organization. Your Briefcase app is a Python package. It lives in the source directory under the app directory. Inside the package, you'll find a couple of things already there. The one we're going to start with is resources. For Briefcase, to know where your image and sound files live, you need to put them in this directory. You'll notice that we already have a couple of files here named after our project. These are Beeware defaults, so we're going to replace them. You can actually make PNGs with your favorite art programs, or the other two, I just look up PNG converters to change the icon. A note when we start adding to this directory. PPB's file lookup requires each subdirectory to have its own dunder init file, so make sure you do this if you subdivide anything here. With that warning out of the way, let's move on to app.py. Very briefly, the Briefcase setup defined a dunder main file that calls our app.main, so our entry point is the app.py file. Inside, we find a collection of imports, a class named Briefcase Bear, and a function called main. Main has only a single code statement, a call to pbb.run. pbb.run is the helper function provided by PPB to help set up your game engine and run it in a single step. The important thing to know is that run takes all the same options as a game engine instance and passes them to the engine for you. The Briefcase cookie cutter gave us the 2 most important ones, the starting scene and a title. At this point, we have a functioning program. If you run the command briefcase dev, you'll get to see a preview of this very basic game. As you can see, this opens a window with a dark blue background and the Beeware logo in the middle of the screen. Next, let's cover what scenes are and how to use them. A scene is just a part of a video game. It's a helpful way to split a game into multiple parts. In PPB, we often use them to differentiate between things like splash screens, menus, and game levels. Under the hood, PPB keeps them in a stack, and only the top of the stack is allowed to respond to events. To demonstrate using events, let's actually refactor this scene. The initialization of the scene happens in dunder init, but that's not the only place you can do scene initialization, and the other way has a couple of advantages. By converting init into onSceneStarted, like so, we can actually now signal events during scene initialization. All event handlers actually look like this. On the name of the event, and it accepts an event instance and a signal function. Now, we can move on to that code inside our SceneStarted handler, self.add_pbb.sprite. Sprites are PPB's names for game objects. They handle carrying metadata for the various subsystems to operate on, specifically the renderer, and also the data and event handlers required to simulate your game. Right now, our sprite is just a standard sprite with no event handlers, so we can fix that by making a player class that subclasses sprite. We'll give it a direction vector and speed as class attributes. Then, in an onUpdate handler, we'll move the sprite a little in that direction each frame. Remember, each handler accepts an event parameter. The update event has a time delta that we can include in the calculation. Next, we're going to replace the sprite with our new sprite. While we're here, I'm going to add a fun little animation for our player. Isn't he cute? The last thing you need to know before making your own game is the techniques for player input. I've introduced you to the idea of events, but this is where we really put those skills to use. Player input on a computer comes from a couple of sources. Keyboard and mice most often. Eventually, PPB will support touch events, but that day is not today. There are 5 different events that let you respond to these inputs. For a mouse, we have on mouse motion, on button pressed, and on button released. Each of these will have a position in the event which tells you where the mouse is at the time of the event. It'll also tell you which of the buttons is pressed in the button or buttons attribute depending on the event. Keyboard events are the on-key pressed and on-key released. They're a lot simpler. They tell you which key was pressed from pbb.keycodes and which modifiers are present. Putting all of this together will take a long while. The fastest I've managed to finish up a video game was 48 hours, and you shouldn't expect your first game to be much faster than that. You should definitely time box your efforts if what you want to do is practice game development. Maybe give yourself a month. In the meantime, here's a game I've already made. With our game working, it's time to prep it for our audience. That means packaging, testing, and uploading your game. We'll start by building our first package. To start, go into your project and run the command briefcase create. A note here, right now you can mostly only build a package on the platform you're building for, especially for the PC platforms. Most of these examples are based on Windows, so keep that in mind as we move on. After running this command, we now have a Windows directory in our app directory. Right now, it's just the files and metadata we'll be building into the final installer. You can actually explore the files and find your app, copies of all the resources, and also a lot of additional Python site packages. A current issue of Briefcase is that it has to support all of your dependencies and all of the standard library. Honestly, this is still tiny as a lot of games go, but if you're concerned about the size of your installers, this is a thing to note. Once you're satisfied that you've got everything in order, it's time to build the installer. Briefcase package will build our installer. Now, if we look in our Windows directory, we see a briefcase bear 0.0.1.msi. This is a full-featured Windows installer. Now that we've created our installer, it's time to test it. To start with, let's go find our installer in our File Explorer. In Windows, with an MSI, all you have to do is double-click. This will open an install wizard. Click through until you're done. Now that it's installed, we need to go into our program menu and find our application. Remember that this one is called Briefcase Bear, so I'm just going to search for that. Click on the icon to run it. As you can see, our game is running in its own Python environment separate from our virtual environment. Now that we know our game works and the installer does what it's supposed to do, we can move on. Because software can often go wrong, before we move on to using this installer, I want to point out a few tips for making updates to this package. First, modify the code you'd like to change. Add any new resources. Then, open up the pyproject.toml again. In the top section, you should bump the version number. After that, we run Briefcase update. Now we can repackage our game and get a new version for the installer. This will be important if you want to patch your game after release. Go us! So this next section, we have to move very quickly. If you don't have one already, you're going to need to make yourself an itch.io profile. From there, go to your dashboard. Click the Create New Project button. The good news is you can't actually publish a game the first time through, so feel free to put anything you want into the following fields. We'll start at the top. Our project needs a title, which should match the name of our app. The system will make us a project URL based on this name. After that, add a short description, a sentence or two. This is the elevator pitch of what your game is. Mine's an infinite runner game, so I'm going to mention that. We can skip classification since we're making a game. Our installers are downloads, so we can also move past what kind of project. Release status lets your users know if this was a prototype or a pre-release or a finished game. Pick what's appropriate for your project. For now, I'm uploading a prototype. Let's stop for a moment on payment options. If you're going to charge money for your games, you're going to need to provide legal information for this step. Now, let's also talk about if you should charge. My personal opinion is that even small games should include some kind of charge. Games have a cost, and you should absolutely keep that in mind. That said, the option free or donate is a great choice where you can suggest the price based on the effort you put into the game, but allow people to download for a lower price, including free, if they'd like. Now, you upload your installer. It's going to take a moment to finish, and once it does, you can tell your users what the download is, in our case, an executable, and also which platform you can install or run it on. In my case, this is a Windows installer, so I'm going to set that check mark. Details is the marketing copy that tells your users what your game is and what's it about. Feel free to write whatever you like. I've got this content that explains this game. The last thing you'll want for sure is a cover image that is at least 350 by 250 pixels. Once you've done all of this and saved, you'll get to view the page and check it out. If you're happy, you can make the page public and officially publish your Python game. Thank you for following along with me on this adventure. If you've enjoyed this recipe and would like to try out the game that I've created here, you can go to pathunstrom.itch.io/briefcase-bear. If you'd like to learn more about PPB and game development, go to ppb.dev. To learn more about Briefcase and the Beeware project, go to beeware.org. And to find more of my work, go to piper.thunstrom.dev or find me on Twitter at @pathunstrom. Thanks for watching and enjoy cooking up your own video games.